The screech of metal on stone tore through the night as Eleanor slammed on the brakes, but it was too late. The car skidded, tires biting the slick London street, before hurling off the road. Rain pelted the windshield like icy needles as they crashed through an iron gate, sending the vehicle tumbling into the fog-shrouded expanse of Highgate Cemetery. Glass shattered, tires groaned, and Eleanor's sister cried out, her voice swallowed by the mist. Eleanor's heart hammered, adrenaline slicing through pain. They were trapped. Alone. Injured. The graveyard loomed like a cathedral of death, twisted Victorian mausoleums clawing at the fog, gravestones leaning as if to whisper their secrets. Eleanor's hand shook as she reached for the door handle, her knuckles white, the taste of fear bitter on her tongue. "Eleanor, what do we do?" her sister whimpered, clutching her arm, voice trembling. The night answered with a whisper, curling through the dense fog, "You shouldn't be here." Eleanor's stomach twisted. The sound was human, yet impossible, breathless, cold, and somehow inside her head. She swallowed, forcing a rational thought, "It's just the wind, just the imagination," but the hairs on her neck refused to lie. The mist thickened, curling around the tombstones like ghostly fingers, and every instinct screamed danger. And yet, the relentless pull of curiosity, the compulsion to prove the paranormal real, drove her deeper into the cemetery's shadowed paths. A figure emerged, sudden and silent, from between the leaning mausoleums. Tall, gaunt, draped in tattered Victorian clothes that hung like mourning shrouds, he stepped forward, eyes hollow, glowing faintly under the moonlight. Eleanor froze. Nathaniel Harker, appearing as if conjured by the fog itself, raised his hands in warning. "The sexton doesn't forgive trespassers. Leave now." Eleanor's gaze swept the twisting paths, gravestones, and crumbling mausoleums. Every exit seemed blocked by shifting fog. Every direction led back to the same eerie heart of the cemetery. Her pulse thundered. She had scoffed at ghost stories, debunked local legends, and written exposés on haunted houses, but now, faced with the impossible, disbelief was a useless shield. From the shadows, ghostly hands clawed at the stone earth, vanishing when she tried to focus on them. The air grew colder, carrying whispers of names she didn't know, or perhaps names she recognized from old family records, long-buried secrets. Eleanor swallowed, forcing herself to breathe. Her sister's whimpers pulled her back from the edge of panic. They needed to survive, to find some solid ground. But the sexton advanced, his presence twisting the cemetery, rearranging mausoleums and tombstones as though the grounds themselves obeyed him. Every step Eleanor took toward safety spiraled her back into the maze of fog, the undead, and shadows. The past pressed in, heavy and accusing. And in that moment, Eleanor realized the terror she sought as a story was no story at all. It was real, and it had been waiting for her. Her hands trembled as she gripped the fog-drenched gateposts, eyes scanning the shifting silhouettes. Every whisper, every flicker of movement, confirmed it. Highgate Cemetery was alive, and the dead were awake. They were watching. They were waiting. And Eleanor had just driven straight into their heart. A cold hand slammed against Eleanor's shoulder, icy enough to make her stumble. She spun, eyes wide, and saw nothing, only mist curling around crooked gravestones, shifting unnaturally. Her sister screamed behind her, a sharp, frantic sound swallowed instantly by the cemetery's oppressive fog. Eleanor's pulse pounded like a war drum. This wasn't imagination, something was here. Something alive in the dead. Nathaniel's voice cut through the haze, urgent but calm. "Stay close. Don't touch anything you don't understand. The sexton will sense it." He appeared from the mist like a shadow stepping into the moonlight, tall, broad-shouldered, his brown hair plastered to his forehead, eyes sharp with warning. "Follow me. The cemetery doesn't forgive mistakes." Eleanor clenched her fists, frustration and fear collided. Mistakes. Nathaniel, we need help. We can't just wander in circles. Her voice cracked. She wanted logic, rationality, something to anchor her. But the cemetery laughed at reason. Every pathway they tried shifted subtly, crypt doors slamming shut behind them, gravestones rearranging with quiet authority. The fog thickened, and whispers curled around their ears, soft at first, then insistent, accusing. Eleanor's chest tightened with every step. Names she had never heard, and names she had. Family names. Ancestors who had wronged the dead. Her hands shook as she clutched the collar of her sister's coat. The air smelled of wet earth, old wood, and something metallic, blood, perhaps, or rust, but indistinct, unnerving. Shadows leapt and stretched, taunting, twisting, and every time Eleanor thought she glimpsed the sexton, he vanished, reappearing elsewhere, always watching. Why are they here? Eleanor whispered, voice small, swallowed by the night. Why are they, us? Nathaniel's jaw tightened. Because this place, it remembers. Every injustice. Every betrayal. And you, Eleanor, you carry their legacy. Eleanor's stomach churned. Legacy. She had come seeking stories, proof, fame. Instead, she had stumbled into a trap woven by her own blood. Every step forward brought visions, her ancestors turning away from pleas, sealing their sins into the cemetery soil. The ground groaned beneath her boots, whispering accusations. Her heart twisted with guilt she didn't understand, yet somehow knew was hers. The sexton's presence pressed closer. She felt it, a cold, oppressive weight that forced her knees to tremble. He didn't need to speak, the silence itself carried judgment. Ghostly hands clawed at the mist, reaching, brushing against her, leaving frost and dread in their wake. Nathaniel held up a hand, gesturing to a crumbling mausoleum. We can use it as shelter, and observe. But stay alert. He watches everything. Eleanor's eyes darted to the mausoleum's cracked stone door, symbols carved deep into the granite, warnings she did not understand but instinctively felt. Her sister clung to her, trembling, tears streaking through dirt and rain. Eleanor swallowed, forcing calm. Logic was gone. Fear was all that remained. Every instinct screamed run, fight, survive, but the cemetery refused to let them go. And in that suffocating, spectral haze, Eleanor realized the terrible truth: escaping wasn't enough. She needed to understand. She needed to confront. The ghosts, the sexton, her ancestors, they demanded acknowledgement. And Eleanor Reed, skeptical journalist, had no choice but to listen. The sexton's laugh echoed through the fog, hollow and bone-chilling, reverberating off the mausoleum walls. Eleanor froze, heart hammering, as the shadows twisted around her like living smoke. You think you understand fear? The voice hissed, scraping across the mist. You've only begun to see it. A skeletal hand shot from the fog, brushing against her cheek. Eleanor yelped, staggering back, the chill biting through her coat. Her sister clutched her arm, sobbing, whispering, "We shouldn't have come." Eleanor shook her head, forcing herself forward, gripping the notebook Nathaniel had handed her, filled with cryptic sketches, symbols, and notes on the sexton's patterns. "We have to keep moving," she urged, voice tight with panic. "We have to understand." Nathaniel's eyes narrowed, scanning the shifting paths. "Every route we take loops us back. He controls the cemetery. Every tombstone, every path, they're his tools. We can't outrun him, we have to outthink him." His hand brushed over the cracked gate of a crypt, ancient symbols glowing faintly under his touch. These markings, they might offer protection. But timing is everything. The fog thickened, swirling violently as if the cemetery itself breathed around them. Eleanor felt the air constrict her lungs, each inhalation a struggle. Whispers threaded through the mist, voices of ancestors accusing, pleading, warning. Her legs burned from running and twisting through the maze of gravestones, and every glance over her shoulder revealed figures she couldn't recognize, or didn't want to. Faces of past wrongdoers, mirrored in her own, stared back at her. Suddenly, the sexton emerged, tall and gaunt, eyes hollow, his tattered Victorian coat flapping in a phantom wind. He raised a skeletal finger, and the earth beneath Eleanor shifted. Paths lengthened impossibly, tombstones rose like walls, narrowing the corridors. Panic clawed at her throat. She realized she was no longer navigating space, but guilt. Every movement, every choice pulled her deeper into her own family's dark history. "You belong here," the sexton whispered, voice both cold and intimate, as if he knew her. "Blood remembers what you try to forget. Your curiosity brought you. Your ancestors sealed your fate." Eleanor stumbled, knees hitting damp soil, mind spinning. The accusation struck harder than any physical blow. Her breath hitched, tears mingling with the mist. Nathaniel grabbed her hand, pulling her toward a broken mausoleum. "Focus, Eleanor. Read the symbols. Channel the energy." But the ghostly hands reached again, clawing at her sleeves, brushing her hair with icy fingers. Every step felt like wading through molten grief, the cemetery warping to trap her in an unending loop. Eleanor's pulse thundered. I don't understand," she cried. "How can I fight something I can't even see?" The sexton's form shimmered, more shadow than substance, moving impossibly fast. "By seeing," he rasped. "By acknowledging what came before, by facing it." And in that instant, Eleanor realized that surviving wasn't about running. It wasn't about escape. It was about confronting the curse, the history, and the darkness stitched into her very blood. She swallowed her fear, squaring her shoulders, gripping Nathaniel's hand with renewed determination. The cemetery's fog pulsed around her like a heartbeat. Eleanor Reed had no choice but to meet the sexton's gaze, and her family's sins, head-on. The ground split beneath Eleanor's feet with a deafening crack, throwing her forward into the icy mist. Gravestones toppled as if alive, and the spectral wails of the dead pierced her ears, each voice a dagger of accusation. "No one leaves," the sexton hissed, looming above her like a shadow stitched from the fog itself. Eleanor scrambled to her knees, coughing as the damp, rotten air filled her lungs. Nathaniel reached for her, eyes wide, voice urgent. "Eleanor. Focus on the symbols. Their power is tied to the curse, you have to act now." She clutched the notebook, hands shaking violently, tracing the ancient sigils that pulsed faintly with a cold, blue light. Each line seemed to hum with the weight of centuries. The cemetery itself began to shift. Paths elongated, looping impossibly, and mausoleum doors swung open on their own. Ghostly figures, some transparent, some disturbingly solid, emerged, faces twisted in rage or sorrow. Eleanor's stomach churned as one apparition stepped forward, a young woman in a torn Victorian gown, eerily resembling. "You brought this on us," the specter whispered, eyes blazing with accusation. Eleanor flinched, memories of whispered family secrets flashing through her mind. Nathaniel pulled her behind a leaning tombstone as skeletal hands reached for them, dragging them toward the cold, yawning crypts. "We have to break the cycle," he shouted, voice trembling. "Channel your will into the sigils, bind their energy." Eleanor's fingers traced the runes faster, heart hammering like a drum. Every glyph she activated sent a ripple through the fog, causing the spirits to wail and twist in agony. A sudden gust blew through the cemetery, scattering mist like fire across the ground. Eleanor's vision blurred, shadows bending unnaturally around the sexton. He whispered her name, low and menacing, Your ancestors' debt is mine to collect, and now, yours." Each syllable felt like ice on her skin, paralyzing yet pushing her forward. She realized the cemetery's torment was not random, it was personal, a reflection of her bloodline's sins. The ground shook violently as a crypt wall crumbled, revealing an inner chamber illuminated by a spectral, sickly green light. Eleanor and Nathaniel tumbled inside, gasping, hearts racing. The walls were inscribed with centuries of curses, some in languages she didn't recognize, others painfully familiar. A family crest, weathered but unmistakable, stared back at her, proof that the sins of her ancestors were etched into the very foundation of this place. The sexton materialized at the chamber's threshold, his hollow eyes glowing with unholy light. "Face it," he rasped. "Face the legacy you denied." Eleanor felt a surge of dread, but beneath it, a flicker of determination. She would not run. She would confront this horror, this personal, ancestral terror. The spirits pressed closer, hands brushing against her shoulders, cold yet hesitant, waiting for acknowledgement. Eleanor inhaled sharply, focusing on the glowing sigils, chanting under her breath, weaving the energy with her intention. Each word each symbol pulsed with her resolve. The spirits recoiled, the fog twisted violently, and for the first time, Eleanor felt a measure of control. The sexton's form shuddered, shadows rippling as the chamber trembled. Eleanor knew this was only the beginning, but she would meet the challenge. She would face the curse. She would face her family's sins. And she would survive, no matter the cost. A scream tore through the fog, echoing off the mausoleum walls, and Eleanor felt her chest seize as if the cemetery itself was crushing her. Shadows stretched and writhed, skeletal fingers clawing at her coat, icy and relentless. "It's in your blood," the sexton hissed, voice like grinding stone, and Eleanor staggered back, eyes wide. Nathaniel grabbed her arm, pulling her behind a shattered gravestone. "Eleanor, they're feeding on your fear." His voice trembled, but his grip was firm. Eleanor's heart pounded as she stared at the twisting shadows. Visions of her ancestors emerged from the fog, faces contorted in rage and pain. One reached for her, and she flinched, feeling a cold pressure that wasn't just the wind. The sexton floated closer, cloak billowing like a storm cloud, eyes glowing with a spectral fire. "Your curiosity brought you here. Your family's curse binds me, and now you," he whispered. The words sank into Eleanor's mind, twisting her thoughts. She staggered, nausea rising as memories of forbidden diaries, hidden letters, and whispered confessions flooded her. The sins of generations bore down on her like a weight she could not escape. "Eleanor," Nathaniel urged, "you have to accept it. Only then can you control what's happening." Her hands trembled over the glowing sigils she had traced earlier, each symbol now vibrating with the energy of the restless dead. The ghosts shrieked, swirling around her, walls of the mausoleum seeming to expand and contract as if breathing. She realized every step she had taken, every decision to pursue proof, had led her directly into this trap. The sexton raised his skeletal hands, summoning the apparitions to press closer, their whispers a chorus of accusation. Eleanor's vision blurred, shadows forming grotesque versions of her family, pointing, shouting, blaming. She sank to her knees, tears mingling with the rain that seeped through the broken roof, and whispered, voice shaking, I understand. I accept what we did. I will carry it." A wave of silence struck the mausoleum. The specters faltered, trembling. The sexton's form flickered, the glowing in his eyes dimming as the oppressive fog thinned slightly. Eleanor felt the first real breath of control, a fragile tether between herself and the chaos. Nathaniel's hand rested on her shoulder, steadying her. The curse had not ended, but for the first time, Eleanor realized that confronting the truth, her ancestors' sins and her own recklessness, was the key. She had faced the heart of the cemetery's wrath, and though the tether remained, she had survived. The sexton's whisper followed her as the fog swirled. The blood remembers, and now, so do you. The ground split beneath Eleanor's feet with a sickening crack, and she stumbled, clawing at the sodden grass as spectral hands shot up around her, grasping, pulling. Nathaniel's voice cut through the chaos. Eleanor, keep moving. Her lungs burned as she scrambled forward, fog swirling, twisting, hiding the path she had thought she knew. The sexton hovered above the central mausoleum, eyes like hollow lanterns piercing the night. You cannot flee what is in your blood, he rasped, and the cemetery seemed to shift, tombstones tilting, gates slamming shut. Every route she tried led back to the same blackened archway, each step dragging her deeper into a living nightmare. Eleanor's mind raced, terror clawing at her reason, the ancestral guilt gnawing with every heartbeat. Nathaniel grabbed her hand, yanking her behind a crumbling gravestone as a wail erupted from the mist. Shadows of her forebears spiraled around them, faces twisted with accusation, arms reaching for her. Focus on the truth. Own it. Nathaniel shouted. Eleanor's teeth chattered as she whispered the confession Nathaniel had guided her to, each word slicing through the oppressive fog like a blade. The sexton's figure shuddered, the air vibrating with a low, mournful tone as if the cemetery itself were alive and listening. Eleanor's knees buckled, but she forced herself to rise, raising trembling hands as ghostly apparitions were. She felt the tether tighten, a weight of centuries pressing, yet in that pressure, a strange clarity emerged. Survival depended on acceptance, not defiance. One by one, the ancestors' spirits paused, hovering in the mist, eyes reflecting a mixture of sorrow and relief. Eleanor's voice grew steadier. I understand. I acknowledge what we did. I will carry it forward responsibly. The sexton's glow dimmed further, his spectral cloak rippling in the windless air. The fog thinned. The spectral hands dissolved into mist. Eleanor's sister stumbled into her arms, pale and shaking, yet alive. Nathaniel exhaled sharply, relief softening his tension. Eleanor's gaze returned to the sexton, who lingered only as a shadowed silhouette, a silent reminder that the curse remained, but now under her recognition and control. The cemetery grew still, an eerie peace settling over the twisted stones and toppled mausoleums. Eleanor's chest heaved, exhaustion and adrenaline mingling. Though the danger had passed, the weight of inheritance clung to her like a second skin. The sexton's last words lingered. You are the keeper now, remember, the dead do not forgive, they endure, and so shall you. Eleanor swallowed hard, aware that her life had irrevocably changed. Highgate Cemetery had survived her encounter, but she knew it would never release her fully. The night's terror had ended, yet the tether of guilt, truth, and ancestral legacy would call her back forever. A deafening clang echoed through the fog as Eleanor's sister screamed, her voice swallowed almost immediately by the mist. Eleanor lunged forward, grabbing her hand, but the cemetery had transformed into a labyrinth of shadows, mausoleums leaning impossibly, gravestones twisting like grotesque dancers. Every path she thought she knew dissolved into nothing, replaced by the same endless fog and spectral hands clawing from the ground. The sexton's hollow eyes appeared in every shadow, following her, a constant, accusing presence. You belong here, he whispered, and the words coiled around Eleanor's mind like chains. Her chest heaved, panic surged. Nathaniel's hand gripped hers, grounding her, yet even his calm was strained. Eleanor, remember. The curse is yours to face, don't fight it with fear, face it with truth. The apparitions of her ancestors swirled faster, faces twisted with rage, sorrow, and longing. Eleanor's stomach turned as she realized they weren't just shadows, they were her family, the architects of the curse, and now her tormentors. Every accusation, every finger pointed at her like a dagger to her heart. She stumbled, nearly falling into an open crypt, the stench of decay rising to choke her. I accept it, she shouted, voice trembling. I understand the guilt. I carry it. The words felt heavy, yet liberating. Ghostly hands paused midair, spectral eyes locked onto her with a strange intensity. The fog seemed to hesitate, swirling slower, the cemetery holding its breath. Eleanor's sister clung to her side, eyes wide, terror-stricken, yet a glimmer of hope flickered. The sexton's form shimmered, less solid, his glow dimming but still piercing. You understand, but do you feel it? He hissed. Eleanor's mind raced, recalling every tale of the cemetery she had scoffed at, every story she had chased for proof. The curse was no legend, it was blood, duty, and truth bound together. She knelt briefly, closing her eyes, letting the weight of generations press on her. Her voice dropped into a steady whisper, I will not run. I will not hide. I accept the past and the dead it carries. A sudden gust tore through the tombs, rattling gates and scattering loose papers, as the apparitions wavered, their anger dissolving into something like acknowledgement. Nathaniel's grip tightened on her shoulder. Now, Eleanor, let it bind you, but do not fear it. Control it. She inhaled sharply, focusing on the tether connecting her to the cemetery, the spectral hands retracting as if bowing to her resolve. The fog thinned further, moonlight breaking through like pale judgment. Eleanor rose, her sister clinging to her arm, both trembling yet standing. The sexton lingered one last time, a spectral sentinel, before fading into the shadows. Silence settled, thick but not oppressive, as if the cemetery itself exhaled for the first time in centuries. Eleanor's heart still pounded, adrenaline and relief intermingling, yet a deep, unshakable understanding had taken root. She walked slowly toward the gate, every step echoing, aware that her freedom was conditional. The curse had transferred, tethered to her lineage and her own acknowledgement. Nathaniel followed, cautious, yet silently impressed at her resilience. Highgate will always call you back, he said softly. Eleanor nodded, lips pressed into a firm line, the weight of inheritance settling over her shoulders. The first rays of dawn illuminated the cemetery in a stark, haunting light. Gravestones glimmered with dew, crypts stood solemn, and the fog lingered only as a ghostly memory. Eleanor's sister exhaled shakily. We made it. Eleanor offered a faint, exhausted smile, knowing it was true in one sense, but false in another. The cemetery had survived, yet so had the curse, and now it was bound to her. Eleanor looked back once, eyes scanning the twisted Gothic silhouettes in the lingering mist. I understand, she whispered, voice steady, almost reverent. I will watch. I will remember. I will endure. The tether was unbreakable, yet no longer a source of terror. It was a duty, a connection to history, and a burden she would bear. Highgate Cemetery had claimed her not as a victim, but as its inheritor, and she had survived to face it fully. The sun rose higher, casting long shadows across the ancient tombs. Eleanor stepped through the cemetery gates, feeling the pull of the spectral hands behind her, gentle now, guiding, tethering. She knew she would return. She knew the dead were never truly gone. And she understood, with a shiver of both dread and resolve, that her life was forever entwined with Highgate Cemetery.